Hey, what is up everyone? Welcome back to Discussion Verse. Today I'm officially kicking off a brand new series I've been really excited to start called Old But Gold. This is where we go back and spotlight films that maybe didn't dominate the box office or live forever in the mainstream spotlight, but quietly left an impact on the people who have found them since. And for this first entry, I couldn't think of a better choice than Bones and All, a film that is gruesome, tender, romantic, and deeply unsettling in ways that don't fade even after the credits roll. And yes, this film stars Timothée Chalamet. But make no mistake, as this is very much Taylor Russell's film, and her performance is the emotional backbone holding everything together. And a huge shout out to my wife, as she was the one that recommended that we watch this film and suggested it just because of how good it is, and I wholeheartedly agree that this is definitely an 8.5 to 9 out of 10. So if you're into horror that doesn't just scare you but actually stays with you, go ahead and take a bite out of that like button and subscribe so you don't miss future Old But Gold deep dives. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. So Bones and All is directed by Luca Guadagnino and written by Daniel Kajanic, based on the novel by Camille De Angelis, and it's a romantic horror road movie that refuses to explain itself in clean or comforting ways. And that deliberate choice is exactly what makes this movie so effective. Before we even meet Marin, who is the main character, and before she hits the road and meets Timothée Chalamet's Lee, her life is already defined by fear, secrecy, and constant movement. After her mother disappears, Marin is raised solely by her father, who becomes her protector, her cover, and her only sense of stability. Childhood, but the signs of what Marin is show up devastatingly early, and her father ultimately realizes that this is something that cannot be attained for Marin or her life. This includes when Marin was 3 years old, she was reported to have attacked her babysitter and ate her face, which is something that her father ultimately had to cover up and move them out of in order to avoid detection. Though that wasn't the first incident, as from that moment on, the pattern began to continue. More incidents start to arise, more close calls, and each one forces her father into the same impossible decision, where they have to pack up, disappear, and start over somewhere new, and hope that this doesn't happen again. The movie picks up with exactly that, where we watch as Marin has accustomed to life in a small town with her father and has made some friends. In this, one of her friends invites her over for a sleepover, which Marin sneaks off to. During the sleepover, Marin ultimately gnaws off the finger of one of the other girls at the sleepover, which causes all the other girls to panic and to begin to scream as Marin attacks this poor girl. From there, Marin runs off and sneaks back to her house, whereupon her dad figures out that she's snuck out and unfortunately attacks somebody. This just further proves that their life is a continuous cycle of laying low, changing towns, and never staying long enough for anyone to ask questions and begin to connect the dots. This final attack done by Marin is her father's last straw, as he then decides to leave her on her own and packs up his own things and abandons her within the next morning. Though he does leave a tape recorder for her to listen to with his voiceover and narration, explaining how he began to see the signs that Marin was what he called an eater and what he learned from this. And this is where the story truly starts to pick up, as now Marin is on her own and in a different town and starting over without the guidance of her father, who is normally her protector. And Taylor Russell plays this with remarkable restraint, as Marin is quiet, observant, and emotionally guarded, and you could feel the weight of a childhood spent waiting for the next moment before everything starts to fall apart. She doesn't perform fear loudly, she carries it. And one of the more unsettling aspects of Bones and All is how little it explains about what Marin actually is, as there's no real diagnosis, no origin story, and no scientific framework. What we are allowed to know is simple and horrifying, and mostly comes from her father's voiceover recordings. This includes that he figures it's inherited and it manifests itself early, and that Marin likely received this from her mother, who has long since abandoned them. One of the other reveals also comes when Marin is in this new town and begins to notice somebody is also watching her, and this is an older gentleman who goes by Sully. In their meetup, he explains that he was able to smell her, which is an ability that the eaters can do. In this talk, he reveals that they are known collectively as eaters, people who are cannibals and have an insatiable hunger for human flesh within this universe. Sully is quite the disturbing character within this film, and he is brilliantly played by Mark Rylance, and his presence is unsettling not because of overt violence, but because of the calm familiarity and presence that he carries. He seems to know more than he lets on, and may have something to do with Marin's past ultimately, or have some sort of familial connection. But all of this is more subtle hints that they kind of linger throughout the film. From there, Marin meets Lee, who is played by Timothy Chalamet, and their connection is immediate, not because they share the same hunger or disease, more or less, but because they shared trauma. Lee is nomadic and drifting from town to town, never staying long enough to belong anywhere, and when we learn why, his behavior takes on a devastating clarity. Through Marin, we learn that Lee was forced to kill his own father in order to protect his little sister when his father attempted to attack and eat her. It's an act born out of necessity, not hunger, and it destroyed Lee. Rather than explain the truth or face his family, Lee ultimately just disappears and slithers away. He carries the guilt, the violence, and the hunger alone, choosing isolation over accountability. Though that's not to say that he doesn't try to connect with his sister and still let her know that he cares about her and loves her by calling her whenever he can from payphones and other things like that. And Chalamet plays Lee as a jittery, defensive, and an emotionally haunted man, wandering through life as an eater and with the choice that he had to make. This isn't a romanticized drifter. This is someone terrified of what he's capable of becoming, and in Marin, Lee sees someone who understands without explanation. We then watch as the two continue to travel together and navigate their lives as eaters. Marin and Lee are seen developing a stronger bond and becoming genuinely in love with one another. We see as they genuinely want to make one another better and continue on in their lives without having to resort to the full-on cannibalism, and see if they could find a way to navigate it. Along with Sully, we learn from the film that there are other eaters around the area, and we see as Marin and Lee encounter such a group. In a truly captivating sequence, we are introduced to a bizarre duo in Jake and Brad. And through this scene, we learn that Jake himself is an eater and has inherited this from birth, whereas the more disturbing reveal is that Brad, the other that is with Jake, is not a natural born eater, and instead voluntarily chooses to participate in cannibalism after first witnessing as Jake was attacking and killing an individual and cannibalizing them. And to make it all the more effed up, it is revealed that Brad was also an ex-police officer, which just adds to this truly crazy sequence within the movie. Luckily enough, Marin and Lee are able to survive their brief encounter with these two crazy lunatics and are able to escape in the middle of the night. Marin then determines that it is best for her to reconnect with her mom, who has long since abandoned them, as that absence has since become even more painful when Marin finally learns the truth when visiting her mom. It is then revealed that Marin's mom has since been in the psychiatric hospital and was voluntarily admitted. We watch as she then goes to visit her, and in that we learn that Marin's mother actually bit off and ate her own hands. During her visit, her mom has since been mute and is not speaking. From a note left by the mother, we learn that the reason why she abandoned the family was because she herself was an eater, and in order to protect them, she felt this was the best thing that she could do. As the note begins to end, it reveals that the mom feels the only way to end the cycle is to also end her daughter's life. In that moment, her mom attempts to do just that, but is held back by the orderlies and kept in her room detained. It's a desperate, tragic attempt at mercy that fails, and in failing, this confirms that some inheritances cannot be undone. Though after this, and for the first time, the uncertainty surrounding Marin's condition has a shape, even if it doesn't have an answer, as she knows where it came from and she understands the fear that drove her mother into isolation, and she herself is forced to confront the very real possibility that this hunger may one day consume her entirely. And in response to that, Marin and Lee do something quietly radical, and that is both Marin and Lee actually living their life and attempting to settle down, if only briefly. And in this, there is laughter, there's routine, there's shared space and the illusion of a future, and for a moment, it feels like the film is allowing them peace. Not a cure, not redemption, but a true sense of belonging within one another. And this stretch of the film is intentionally purposeful, and that's what makes it so powerful, as Luca Guadagnino lets us sit in the stillness and the peacefulness that Marin and Lee have since accomplished. But it's clear that Bones and All has never been interested in false comfort, as the peace is quickly shattered when Sully resurfaces, having tracked both Marin and Lee down once again. Sully is dangerous in that he is at the further end of the spectrum of isolation and has truly had no one else like him. And when he met Marin, Sully becomes entirely obsessive and attempts to keep Marin as his partner as they continue on in their lives as eaters. For Marin, Sully is a representation of the monster that she is trying to escape and not become. And it's really hard to pinpoint Sully's obsession with Marin, whether it was born from blood ties, shared history, or projection. It ultimately does culminate in violence. And in defending Marin, Lee is actually put in a precarious situation as he is dealt a devastating blow, as in the commotion, Lee was actually stabbed by Sully and is slowly starting to bleed out. Despite that, both Marin and Lee actually end up killing off Sully and leave his body in the bathtub for dead. Lee's sacrifice is super devastating, and the ending is even more so, and that's not because of the shock factor, but because it really feels tragic psychologically honest. Marin survives, but survival comes at a cost. As when Lee is dying, he begs her to eat him as a final act of love, and instead of letting him bleed out to die. At first, Marin is hesitant and refuses, telling him that she doesn't want to eat him or do that, but Lee explains that it's the most easiest thing to do, to love and to eat him as a final act of love that they are going to share while Lee is still alive. It's an insanely powerfully sad moment, and we see just how much these two love each other, with Marin's hesitancy to even do just that, but Lee's willingness to sacrifice himself in order for Marin to eat and satiate her hunger as an eater. And Marin does just that. She eats Lee, bones and all. And afterwards, she is left alone again, carrying love, loss, and hunger all at once. And in the film's final moments, she makes that choice that is both horrifying and intimate. And it's very transparent that this is not Marin consuming Lee out of cruelty, but out of the pure connection and genuine love that they have for one another. The final image of Marin eating Lee, bones and all, is not framed as victory or damnation. It's acceptance, and not of the hunger, but of the reality that love for Marin will always be intertwined with loss. And Bones and All doesn't end by telling us everything will be okay. It actually ends with uncertainty, but there are a few things that we know that will be taken away, and one of which is that Marin will continue on this cycle of having to move and be in different towns as she navigates her life as an eater. And what makes Bones and All linger is its refusal to offer true answers. It doesn't explain where eaters come from. It doesn't offer redemption or a cure. It simply asks the audience to sit with that discomfort, just as Marin has her entire life. And this isn't a story about fixing what's broken. It's about living with it and loving despite it, and deciding whether connection is worth the cost. At the root of it all, Bones and All is a love story where intimacy is dangerous and inheritance is terrifying, and affection can consume you whole. It's anchored by Taylor Russell's haunting performances and elevated by both Timothée Chalamet and Mark Rylance's performances and vulnerability within their roles as fellow eaters. The film is more than deserving of belonging in the old but gold category, and if you enjoyed this review and breakdown, I highly recommend that you go find that on a streaming platform and sit down and watch it now. Though that does wrap up my breakdown here and my thoughts, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, this is your friendly reminder to go ahead and smash that like button, and if you enjoyed this video, then make sure you click that subscribe button so you never miss a new video. And let me know in the comments below what film you think deserves the old but gold treatment next. As always, this is Discussionverse, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!